This video will help you prepare for the Quantitative Techniques section of the UG CLAT 2020 exam. It includes suggestions and resources to make sure that you are ready to take the exam. To begin with, let's go over the syllabus and skills that you will be tested on. The Quantitative Techniques section of the UG CLAT 2020 will include short sets of facts or propositions, graphs, or other textual, pictorial, or diagrammatic representations of quantitative information, followed by a series of questions. The questions and passages for this section are created afresh by the question setters. Some graphs and histograms have also been derived from public sources, such as the website of the Reserve Bank of India. Each passage will be followed by a series of questions that typically ask you to answer 10 standard mathematics questions from areas such as number theory and basic arithmetic, averages and percentages, ratio and proportion, mixtures and allegations, time and work, time, distance and speed, fractions and equations, monetary evaluations, probability, permutations and combinations. You may also be required to answer questions in the field of data interpretation, such as those that require you to analyze histograms, charts, tables, and other graphical information, extracting information from such graphical information, and questions from the areas of 10 standard mathematics that we just discussed based on such information. As budding lawyers, we are hopeful that you will cultivate the capacity to separate useful from unuseful information and to be able to use the information you see to draw conclusions. This is a skill you will have to practice often over your career with a wide range of information, quantitative and otherwise, and across many disciplines. Rather than the complexity of calculation, we are focused on your ability to find and manipulate relevant information comfortably. It would help to keep in mind a few important points while approaching the questions in the Quantitative Techniques section of the UG CLAT 2020. Since the Quantitative Techniques section of the UG CLAT 2020 differs from previous year's papers in that it requires you to read a passage or analyze a set of graphical information before attempting a question, it is very important that you first go through the passage provided or the graphical information supplied to you and list out or underline the information that is provided to you and the information that you may need to answer the questions. As a simple example, a passage may provide the various speeds of trains and the distance between two stations. In this case, you know that you will probably need to calculate the time such trains may take to cover such distances. Again, since the Quantitative Techniques section of the UG CLAT 2020 follows the general trend of changes in the CLAT towards a more comprehension-based format, it is important that you read the passages and questions very carefully so as to ensure you have understood the information supplied and what exactly the question is asking of you. Bear in mind that the question setters would tend to move away from formulae-based questions towards more logic-based questions. This means that they are not only looking at your ability to conduct simple mathematical calculations, they are also looking for your ability to analyze the passages and graphical information. Quite often, a later question in any set of questions in the Quantitative Techniques section of the UG CLAT 2020 will require you to use some information that you may have calculated or derived in the course of answering a previous question. Since this is the case, it is important that you keep your rough notes and calculations neat and handy so that you can quickly refer to such information when needed. Since the UG CLAT 2020 is, among other things, a test of your ability to answer questions efficiently, it would be a terrible waste of time if you had to hunt through your rough notes and calculations to find some vital piece of information. In some instances, it is very helpful to keep a set of rough notes where you list out the main people, objects, or artifacts that the question relates to, such as trains, boats, vessels, and so on. Keep listing out relevant information relating to each of them as you go along. For example, in a question about time, speed, and distance, it is very useful to have information such as the length of a train, its speed, and what time it leaves a station readily available. Not only will this save you time, it will also help avoid any mistakes in going back and forth across your notes to find some information that you had derived some time back. To help illustrate the different questions and the way to best approach them, let's go over an example where we can go through the passage together and then examine the rationale for the correct answers. Sung South Bank's employees' picnic on a river island turned into a disaster as the newly constructed road bridge connecting the island to the riverbank collapsed. Evacuation operations had to be carried out by ferrying the employees from the island across the river and onto the riverbank. 1/6 of the employees were evacuated by villagers in a country boat. Of the remaining, 1/5 were evacuated by fishermen in a trawler. The remaining evacuees were joined by villagers who were helping with the evacuation. Finally, 8 motorboats with 8 people each left the island. Now let's move on to the questions. If half of the motorboats had 1 villager each and the other half had 2 each, what was the ratio of villagers to employees in the motorboats? Your options are A. 1:8, B. 3:13, C. 3:16, or D. 2:13. The correct answer is B. Here is the rationale behind the choice. The correct answer is B, and this is how we arrived at the conclusion. The number of people that left on the 8 motorboats is 8 multiplied by 8, which is equal to 64. Let's call this calculation 1. Half of 8 boats had 1 villager each, which is half multiplied by 8 multiplied by 1, which is equal to 4. Let's call this calculation 2. Half of 8 boats had 2 villagers each, which is half multiplied by 8 multiplied by 2, which is equal to 8. Let's call this calculation 3. Therefore, the total number of villagers, that is y, is calculation 2 plus calculation 3, which is equal to 4 plus 8, which is 12. Let's call this calculation 4. Therefore, total number of employees in the 8 motorboats is calculation 1 minus calculation 4, which is 64 minus 12, which is equal to 52. Let's call this calculation 5. And finally, the ratio of villagers to employees in the 8 motorboats is calculation 4 is to calculation 5, which is 12 is to 52, which is 3 is to 13. How many employees were evacuated in the trawler? Your options are A. 13, B. 15, C. 12 or D. 10. The correct answer is A, and here is the rationale behind the choice. If the number of employees evacuated by the country boat is equal to X by 6, let's set this aside as calculation 6. The remaining number of employees after the country boat evacuation is equal to X minus X divided by 6, which is equal to 5X divided by 6. This is calculation 7. Number of employees evacuated by the trawler is equal to 1/5 multiplied by 5X divided by 6, which is equal to X divided by 6. Let's set this aside as calculation number 8. Make sure you see the rationale for the previous question in order to find out more about the calculated data. From calculation 5 in the previous question, we know that the number of employees evacuated by the 8 motorboats is equal to 52. Therefore, 52 is the number of remaining employees after the country boat evacuation minus the number of employees evacuated by the trawler. That is, 52 is equal to calculation 7 minus calculation 8, which is equal to 5x divided by 6 minus x by 6, which is equal to 4x divided by 6, which is equal to 2x divided by 3. Therefore, x is equal to 52 multiplied by 3 divided by 2, which is equal to 78, which is the total number of employees. Therefore, the final result, that is, the number of employees evacuated by the trawler, is equal to 78 divided by 6, which is 13. If there were 4 villagers in the country boat and 6 fishermen in the trawler, and if an equal number of people travelled in each trip, that is, the country boat, trawler and motorboats, how many people travelled in each trip? Your options are A. 10, B. 6, C. 9 or D. 8. The correct answer is A, and this is how we arrived at the calculation. The total number of employees is equal to 78. This is taken from the rationale from the previous question. Villagers and fishermen in the country boat and trawler is equal to 4 plus 6, which is equal to 10. The number of villagers in the 8 motorboats is equal to 12. This is as per calculation 4 of the previous question. The total number of people that travelled is 78 plus 12 plus 10, which is equal to 100. The number of trips is equal to 1, which is the country boat, plus 1, which is the trawler, plus 8 boats. This equals 10. The average number of people travelled by the country boat, trawler and the last 8 boats is therefore 100 divided by 10, which is equal to 10. After they reached the shore, 1/3 of the employees took a taxi, half of them took a bus, and the remainder took the train. The cost of hiring a 4-seater taxi was Rs 500. The cost of hiring a bus was Rs 5,000, and each train ticket was priced at Rs 75. The taxis took a maximum of 4 passengers each. If the total expenditure on the different modes of transport was rupees 9,475, how many taxis were hired? Your options are A. 5, B. 6, C. 7 or D. 8. The correct answer is C, and here is the rationale for it. The total number of employees is 78 as per the calculations made in the previous questions. The number of employees that took a taxi is equal to 1/3 multiplied by 78, which is equal to 26. Since each taxi is only a 4-seater, the number of taxis needed is equal to 26 divided by 4, which is equal to 6.5. Therefore, the number of taxis hired is equal to 7. The total number of employees in Sangsath Bank is 4.5 times the number that went on the picnic. The securities department of the bank consists of 4/9 of the total number of employees. The percentage of Sangsath Bank's employees in the securities department is, your options are A. between 45% to 50% of the total number of employees in the bank, B. between 40% and 45% of the total number of employees in the bank, C. more than 50% of the total number of employees in the bank, or D. less than 40% of the total number of employees in the bank. The correct answer is B, and this is how we arrived at the calculation. The total number of employees evacuated equals 78 as per calculations in previous questions. The total number of employees in the bank is equal to 4.5 multiplied by 78, which is equal to 351. The number of employees in securities is equal to 4/9 multiplied by 351, which is equal to 156. The percentage of people in securities is equal to 156 divided by 351 multiplied by 100, which gives us the result 44.44%. Before ending this video, here are a few strategies to help you prepare for the Quantitative Techniques section of the UG CLAT 2020. These strategies may help you in your preparation and include suggestions and ideas to help you review and practice for the exam. As with all the other sections of the UG CLAT 2020, practice is key in preparing for the Quantitative Techniques section. And in this case, luckily, you should have ready access to more than enough practice materials. The best way to prepare for this section of the UG CLAT 2020 is to go back to your 10th standard mathematics textbooks and try and practice the questions and exercises in those books as much as possible. Another good source for practice materials? The previous year's question papers. While they may not include the additional element of requiring you to analyze a passage or graphical information and derive usable information from them, they will still help you develop the ability to perform common mathematical calculations quickly and accurately. When you begin preparing for quantitative techniques, do not worry too much about how much time you need to answer questions. The more important thing at this stage is to answer questions accurately. As you practice and as you develop a habit of being able to derive accurate answers, you can start focusing on speed. At this stage, it should be relatively easier for you to answer questions more quickly since you have already figured out how to answer them accurately. Whenever you attempt a set of practice questions or a sample test, don't just look at the answers to find out if you were right or wrong. Always make sure you go through the solution as well to see if the manner in which you solved the question can be improved upon. While you may have found the right answer to a question, it is quite possible that someone else has figured out a quicker or easier way to do so, and it would benefit you to understand that method of solving the question as well. For more information on sample papers, syllabus, or the exam, do visit our website www.consortiumofnlus.ac.in.